This is the CreaseCast.
All right, everybody, here we are, CreaseCast number 157. I am your host, Cody Sievertson, with the man who built the place, Lach and Cody. We are covering a big fat W in the Canucks universe, the VCU, if you will. A big fat 2-1 victory over the 29th ranked Montreal Canadiens. What is there to say, really, about a bad team beating a fellow awful team?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Rebuild's over, guys. We did it. Everybody get hyped. Playoffs are next. We are on a one-way ticket to championship town, and
this is when the streak begins.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna. What game was this? This was 21, I think. This was their 21st game, I think, of the year. So
yeah, and they needed to win
one more games.
Yeah, someone was like they needed to win like their next 40 of 60 games to have a chance at playoffs, which is like just an outrageous pace. And I mean, crazy shit has happened in the NHL, but if you've watched the last 20 games of the Canucks, you're like, there's no way they could possibly pull off a 40-game win. Like at this point, there's just no way.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that, like, again, even though the Canucks' best players aren't necessarily playing very well, I don't see a scenario where even if they did start going back up to the expectations of what they're expected, that they're gonna that suddenly fixes every single problem, and the team is just the best. Suddenly, is just the new Tampa Bay Lightning. Like that's probably a bit of a stretch here at this point. But
2-1. Yeah, 2-1 a narrow victory, a victory that hinged on a two-pad stack in the final 4 minutes of the game from Thatcher Demko, who is, of course, naturally our Infinity Blocker winner. But the fact that they needed that to beat like one of the worst teams who fired every single person imaginable in their head office to kickstart their own personal rebuild, and that was after a win, as you pointed out to me.
Yeah, they beat Pittsburgh on Saturday night, and during that broadcast of that game was when the Jeff Gorton news dropped,
right?
Which I believe Elliot Friedman said on 31 Thoughts like today that when that came out, when that news was made public, Marc Bergevin was not aware of it and did not know that was a thing. So the writing was very much on the wall at that point. And then today, Marc Bergevin is gone. Scott Mellenby was the assistant GM. He had resigned yesterday. I believe was because the initial plan apparently was for him to essentially take over the role, and then the Canadiens owner Jeff Molson essentially passed him over.
He may have been sold a bill of goods, because I think the report was he was under the impression that he'd be like the main candidate for taking over for Marc Bergevin in the future should Bergevin's contract not be renewed. And when he was talking with Jeff Molson basically did the Office thing where they're like, David, was Michael Scott ever a serious candidate for the New York managerial position? And he's like, no, he was not. What do you want me to say? He's a nice guy. It's like the exact same thing happened with Mellenby, where they're just like, yeah, no, wasn't really a guy. We told him that, but we didn't think we'd actually have to follow through with it. So he quit, which is good.
Power to him.
Yeah, exactly. You should know any person, whether you're in hockey, whether you're a Subway sandwich artist, whether you're, some random company or whatever, know your worth and stand by your own personal morals. So if this guy felt he was getting screwed out of a job that he believed he was entitled to get, then hey, you're fully empowered to move on. So yeah, that shit show kind of very briefly overshadowed the Canucks shit show, which was their Saturday loss to the Boston Bruins. Or sorry, was that Sunday? That was Sunday. That was yesterday.
Yeah, the 2 games. So they had 2 games. Yeah, God, this season, huh? 2 games in 2 days. They lost the first one against Boston. They won obviously today 2-1 against Montreal. It's very much the 2-1 win, like you said. It kind of feels like the cherry on top of a crap sundae. It's very much
Yeah.
it's nice. It's a nice garnish. It's nice that it's nice for decoration, and that's about it. Especially because in most sundae cases, it's a maraschino cherry, which is disgusting.
Yeah, it's like stepping in dog shit, but the dog shit's kind of dry and old, so it doesn't really like smear everywhere on your shoe. But yeah, it's still pretty gross.
It's easier to clean off.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's more. It's not a full like hose down. It's just a scrape.
Yeah. It's a little.
Yeah. God,
A little
man.
ladle, little
Yeah,
spatula.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like again, it took a Thatcher Demko heroic performance in the third period once again to get the Canucks to their 7th win.
Does that even need to be said anymore? If they're
kind of
winning games, it's
does.
because Demko's putting on a stellar performance.
Yeah,
It like doesn't even need to be said anymore.
yeah, we can literally count one win, I think, off one win that they won based on like the actual like offense and
Like
defense
the
stepping up in the Dallas
game.
game. Yes, the Dallas game. That's the
Again,
one game where Demko was a little bit off and they won it for him. Like
and
that
again against another terrible team.
Yeah, tell me about it. And I mean Boston, for what it's worth, is not exactly in the best spot either. Like
No.
they're not like again, you and I talked about it at the beginning of the season that Boston quietly didn't have a great offseason. Like they didn't really, they added they added Taylor Hall like full term, like on a full contract. But besides that, they lost Tuukka Rask and had to go with a much more inexperienced tandem with Swayman, who had a very good game to his credit. I mean, he was rough in the early going, but he got a lot better as the game went on.
Yeah.
And then Linus Ullmark, or sorry, I'm thinking of Ullmark. That's my bad.
Ullmark was the one that had a surprisingly good game.
Right. Yeah. And Swayman and Ullmark have done their best, but again, they're no Tuukka Rask. Tuukka Rask is it's not exactly a goaltender you can easily replace. And I think, Montreal, I mean, other team that's clearly suffering without a great goaltender in Carey Price right now. As okay as Jake Allen actually has been for them. The Bruins overall are a much older team. There's a lot of miles, particularly on a guy like Patrice Bergeron, who's still a big part of their offense. Yeah. Like there's already a lot of like ideas of like he might be close to retiring pretty soon here. Because again, like he's a guy that plays a style of hockey that's very taxing on the body, and he can only hold up for so long. And then even like Brad Marchand, like this has been a decade since 2011 when he was a rookie being a jerk against the Canucks. He's still a jerk. That part hasn't aged, but again, 10 years is a long time in the league. It's a long time to be playing hockey at a premier level. And outside of like David Pastrnak, they're not really in the same spot they were last year or the year before when they were one of like the best teams in the league. So for the Canucks to kind of have that lead in the second period and then blow it in very, very rough fashion was not good. Yeah.
I mean, it was very funny to watch, like, cause for like people like you and I who are just basically like just finding like the silver lining, like something to laugh about, because that's all you can really do is just laugh at how like badly things are going. That was great for us. It was just like, of course they take a late penalty. Their terrible penalty kill gives up a goal. Brad Marchand decides to just like completely embarrass Kyle Burrows by giving him the old runaround on the goal line and then setting up Pastrnak for the tap in. Like, it was hard to watch because it was just like, oh, guys, come on, just kill a penalty for the love of God.
God, tell me. I mean, they did today. They killed them all today. Good job. Including a late one, another late Kyle Burrows penalty. Like, they killed that off. But I mean, I'll say this: like, where we're at with the Canucks at this point, right, is normally like I would say, look, even though it's been a decade since the Cup final, since the 2011 Cup final, I think in a lot of cases, even up until the last time the Canucks played the Bruins, which would have been, I believe, February of 2020, that huge 9-3-4 win over
that destruction game.
Like the Bruins, I believe at that time had the best record in the National Hockey League, and the Canucks just whooped them. They had Tyler Toffoli scored a couple goals. I think Jake Virtanen had one, just to tell you how long it's been. And Pettersson definitely had a goal. Louis Eriksson had one. Everyone got into that game. Just about everyone had some sort of say in that game. And up until that point, people still were like, every game against Boston is huge. It is the game. It doesn't matter how bad the Canucks are. It doesn't matter how bad the Bruins are, more or less. Generally speaking, it's always been like a game, a must win or a must watch kind of game. God, I was not interested in this one. I have not been this little enthused in a Canucks Bruins game since I think Hannu Toivonen was in net for the Bruins.
God.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I spent most of Sunday kind of vegged out because Friday and Saturday I was at my wifey's company Christmas party, which is she's like an executive, so you got to go and you got to dress to the nines, you got to help set up, you got to do this, you got to mingle with everybody, so it's really taxing. And then so Sunday came around, I'm like, okay, Roxy, let's set up our Christmas tree, because if we don't do it now, I am not going to have time over the next couple weeks. It's going to the Abbotsford Canucks schedule ramps up really hard, so we're not going to have time. And then soon enough, Christmas is going to be over, and we're not going to have done anything. So I was like, let's do it now. So while she slept on the couch, I set up the Christmas tree, and then I was like, oh my God, there's still a Bruins game tonight. And so I planted myself on the couch, had Succession running on the giant TV, and then I had the Bruins game on my laptop, and I was just watching it. I'm like, oh, okay, they got a lead. That doesn't really happen that often. As I turned back a bit later, third period, just slowly losing it. I'm like, attaboys.
Yeah.
There you go.
Never mind. Whoops. Yeah.
Yep. So well, but then today, I was really stressing because I've got to track so much before they play, I think 6 or 4 games in the next 7 days or something, which means I'm basically tracking every waking minute of my life. And so I was like, I don't know if I care to even watch this Montreal game, because it would have been more interesting, I think, if they hadn't fired Bergevin yet. If it was still up in the air, if we didn't know if they were going to make the changes, because then at least the game would have the intrigue of 2 struggling franchises with rumors in the news that their ownerships are seeking other options. That would make the game really high stakes. Whatever team loses is probably going to see their entire coaching staff or their management staff get turfed following the loss. But then they did it on Saturday, and so it was just oh, so this is just a matchup between 2 shitty teams. One that has an ownership group that is, for whatever reason, taking their sweet time to make the decision, and the Habs, who are admirably committed to the fact that even though they're 4 months removed from a cup run, are that was a blip. We need to rebuild while we still can. Not a lot of owners would do that. When Francesco Aquilini was presented that in 2012, or after the 2011 run, he said, no, we are still a playoff team. Keep building me a playoff team, which was obviously very difficult, and following ownership advice is what got Mike Gillis canned. Kudos to Jeff Molson. He, has a lot of spotty bits about his ownership past. Number one being the Logan Mailloux pick and not firing everybody on the spot for that. But it takes a lot to be 3 months after a cup run to be hey, we can't keep milking this. We're going to have to actually reassess and reevaluate, which is very funny because 3 to 4 months ago, or however long it was, when Montreal was in the cup finals, it was Jim Benning who said, look at the Habs as a reason why you just need to build a team that can get to the playoffs, because anything can happen. And here we are 3 months later, the anything that can happen mentality has resulted in them being a bottom feeder team, and the team that anything that could happen did happen for them in playoffs has completely decided that it's no longer going to work. We need to rebuild. And that's telling. And I would love to be a fly in the wall in the Benning offices when they found out that Jeff Molson had fired Bergevin and everybody.
Oh
'Cause,
yeah, I have to
like,
imagine that did not help them feel like any
no,
assuage any of their concerns. No.
because I genuinely wonder, like, 'cause he said he went to 650, I think, with that interview when he said, we just need to we want to get to playoffs, because when you get to playoffs, anything can happen. Look at Montreal. And that was kind of like their rallying cry. Like, don't worry about the long-term future. So long as you get there, it's what happens when you get in that matters. And so I'm sure that was the big selling point to ownership in his final year of his contract. Like, hey, if we trade our first, we get rid of all this dead money, we bring in OEL and Garland, we'll get to playoffs, and who knows what can happen. And ownership probably signed off on that. And 3 months later,
Here we are.
that management philosophy that was put on a pedestal by one group got the other group completely canned, which is great. And I wish you and I could have been in the office for that. Imagine that was your Botchford project day, where you're like,
God.
you're in the office with Jim, and you're interviewing him about like Connor Garland or Niels Hoglander, and then someone bursts in the office like, Jim, you won't believe it. They just fired everybody in Montreal.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly right. Oh man. I'm actually writing an article right now for Canucks Army, literally talking about basically this, right? Like what the Canucks need to, essentially why the Canucks need to be taking notes on what the Canadiens just did. Which should be out by the time you get this podcast as well, or at least
you'll get a double
that
dose
time,
of Lachlan, hopefully.
a double dose of Lachlan. I am so sorry, but no. You mentioned the Canucks really mentioned Montreal. They've also mentioned St. Louis in the past as a team that have like, oh, look at what St. Louis did. They went from bottom of the league, they fired a coach, and then suddenly they're in the playoffs, and then they won, that kind of thing, right? And fans, a lot of fans who are very much on the vocal about the trusting management side of things have kind of said similar stuff. And the thing that I really want to hammer home here is that for all of the mistakes that Marc Bergevin has made, let's put aside even just the Logan Mailloux thing. Let's put aside the fact that he's linked to the Hawks, to the Blackhawks thing. Let's put aside the scandalous stuff and just focus specifically on the on ice situation. The fact of the matter is that while Marc Bergevin was general manager, the Habs won 3 division titles. They made the playoffs 6 times, and made the conference final twice, and went to a cup final as recently as last year. And that is not a team that is clearly not a team that the Canucks should be comparing themselves to, because that team has, for all their flaws, a track record of consistently making the playoffs and consistently at least getting a few wins out of it as well, sometimes winning, and including getting in based on being the best in their division. They've done it before. Last year, they might have just scraped their way in, but in years prior, they've been one of the better groups. And I'll say, as far as a hockey stance is concerned as well, that there are similarities between the Canucks and the Habs in terms of like how they got there. Specifically, the Canadiens are another team that have been extremely reliant on great goaltending on a nightly basis. Not to the same extent as the Canucks, but in the same idea of like, there have been multiple years where the Canadiens playoff aspirations got completely derailed because Carey Price got hurt. And they didn't have the horses to keep it up. Not because the goaltending, the backups they had were bad necessarily. It was literally just the fact that they were so heavily reliant on getting Carey Price level goaltending that when they didn't get it, they couldn't keep up. And the Canucks are heading in that direction right now, where they have been actually. I mean, they have been for a while. It was Markstrom before this, and it's Demko now. A team that just needs the goaltending to be incredible at all turns, and when it isn't, they can't find the back of the net. They can't get the run support to finish it off and win. So yeah, there are similarities in terms of like how both teams got there. But again, the Habs have a track record. So did St. Louis, who made the playoffs, I think, almost every single year from 2012 on.
They missed like once, I think, and
they
when they
missed-
did miss, they fired
They
what's his name? Not Mike Yeo.
Ken Hitchcock. Yeah.
Yeah. They got rid of Ken Hitchcock and they brought in Doug, whatever the fuck.
They brought in Mike Yeo. So they brought in Mike
Oh,
Yeo,
that's right.
and then
Okay.
they went to Mike Yeo, and then they went to Craig Berube very early on in that cup year. Yeah, and that's
Craig. Okay.
Yeah, and that's again like those two cases that keep getting brought up in terms of the Canucks are whether or not they have some minor like similarities, they're not comparable when you look at the broader picture. When you look at the fact that those teams were consistently making playoff runs and the Canucks were not. And now we're in a situation where the Canadiens are getting a jump start on getting things started. And you're right, like in terms of like ignoring the harder issues that the Canadiens ownership clearly missed and should have been putting a bigger emphasis on in terms of like not drafting Logan Mailloux specifically. The Canadiens having the foresight to be like, yep, maybe we made a cup final last year, but this team is clearly needs a lot of work. And it's time to let somebody else take that role over, while not necessarily having a candidate ready to go. Because Jeff Gorton's coming in to be president of hockey ops, I believe. He's not going to be the GM. So they're not looking at this in the same way the Canucks are, where the Canucks are like, we're going to wait until we find somebody, which is
and then we'll just fire them and replace them, and hopefully that spurs the team into playing better or whatever. But the Montreal plan appears to be like a bit more thought through. Like even Jeff Molson was like, having a single GM, I don't think that works for this market or for the NHL anymore. And he's actually being progressive. He's looking at the possibility of having multiple GMs, like the kind of like the Tampa Bay model where they have like 4 AGMs to Julien Brisebois. Like that's smart. That shows obviously there's a rift between him and Marc Bergevin to the point where he's like, he's fired the guy, but he was smart enough to listen to Bergevin, I'm assuming in their exit interview, where Bergevin obviously said something to the effect of like, hey, this is a tough job. It's exhausting. It needs more hands on deck to build a credible contender. And Molson listened to him. Like, kudos.
Yeah, I was actually looking at one of the things I did today is I actually went and looked at like basically like the photos of like the day Marc Bergevin was hired to now to like his most recent interviews. And like, again, like, let's be clear here. I'm not saying this like anything like negative about a guy's like body appearance or anything like that, or anything like of the sort of like,
let's body shame him.
We're not doing that here, but I am gonna and it's been obviously 10 years he's been or at least that close to that amount where he's been in the Canadiens. But if you look at the difference between what he looked like when he started the job to when he finished it, like it was a case of a guy, you could see a guy who is literally put every last ounce of his body and his mind into that job, to the point where he is clearly very exhausted. Like he looked like a guy who's, again, another guy like in terms of like hard miles. And honestly, like Jim Benning, people have brought that up recently too, that Jim Benning looks,
you've seen
really
the pictures different. It looks like a 40-year-old aged 30 years or something. Like
seriously,
it is a tough job because I feel like people like assume like these guys are just like cakewalking like half the time, but to be a GM, you need to be dialed in like 24/7, 365. You don't really get a vacation. You need to be not only managing the business side of things, but the actual hockey side of things. You need to be future planning. You need to be daily, day-to-day planning. You need to be on top of all your players, all your prospects. Like that is exhausting. Considering like I'm writing a hockey blog about an AHL team, my job and my marriage, and that seems like a lot, let alone a fucking hockey team worth $900 million.
Exactly. Literally a billionaire coming to you being like, here's a pile of money that I'm going to trust you not to burn.
Don't
like literally
fuck this up.
Yeah. It's such a like that job. Like I do have sympathy for general managers like in that sense, because that is the pressure of doing that is a lot, which is why you need in a way, which is why like you mentioned, it's all the more important to get
More hands
in
on
the
deck.
same way that it's good to have like a support system around you at home, like with
Yeah.
your family and everything and your friends. It's in a business sense, it's really good to have a support system of people who are going to tell you, who are going to tell you what they think honestly, and are going to tell you and give you their best opinions, even if sometimes that's not always what you want to hear. And that's what makes for a better management team.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it looks like the Canadiens are going in that direction now, which is good for them. And if you're the Canucks looking at this right now, looking at what the Canadiens are doing, again, a team that went to the Cup Finals last year and is doing this, and you're sitting there with only, I think, a win more than they have. You got to be asking yourself the question, why are we waiting? Like, what exactly are we benefiting? What benefit are we actually getting here by not just at least taking out the other guy who are already not letting do his job to the best, clearly.
Yeah.
And just at least like letting an interim take over for now while we find somebody somebody.
Like don't subject your GM to be in a position where he takes calls from other GMs saying, "Hey, what about X player?" And he says, "Oh, I can't do anything right now because I don't have the authority to make trades or sign players or do my job."
Or
like
worse,
that's not good for him.
Yeah, or worse, just another GM calling up being like, "Hey, you still got a job?" Like,
like
you still work there?
like,
jeez, no.
Or fellow coaches like Travis Green. I'm sure like Nolan Baumgartner or Jason King are like, "Hey, have you heard anything yet?" And he's like, "I don't know. I hope we still have jobs. We're coaching tonight. I haven't heard anything."
Owners in the building in Montreal.
Owners in the building just ignore all of the reports from like the major media insiders saying, "Yeah, they're looking for replacements for us." Like, that's a shitty thing to do to your coaching staff, and this is why, like if the Canucks are taking their time right now, like if the Aquilinis are taking their time, I hope it's because they're trying to find a president of hockey operations to kind of lead the way going forward. Because like you were saying, hiring a new set of coaches, hiring just a new GM to replace the current one, like that doesn't really solve anything. Like this needs a full top to bottom organizational realignment so that it makes sense for today's NHL. And like you said, throw interim tags on Bradshaw or Chris Gear or whatever. Like they don't have to
Whoever
make trades. Doesn't matter. Just do them do your people a favor from a PR standpoint. Stop trotting Travis Green out there like awkwardly where he's like a dead man walking, basically. If you are planning to get rid of him.
Yeah, and Jim Benning too, right? Like it's the case of like, if you care about the service they've given you over the last 5 to 8 years, you should care about the idea of like, I'm not going to subject you to this for the rest of the year. I'm going to, which is why even though I don't have a replacement lined up for you, I'm going to let you go now so you don't keep having to field these questions and this scrutiny being under the microscope every single day. At least you can go home and rest and like roll and focus on yourself, kind of thing. And like and also like just as an aside, the fact of the matter is like the longer you take to like, patience is important. Like obviously making a panic hire isn't good, but at the same time, you do want to, the sooner you figure out who's taking over, the better, because you don't want to go into, because in theory right now, the way the Canucks season is going, you don't want to go into next year or into the off season having not made any moves to better yourself at that point. Because right now you're not. Because right now, clearly Jim Benning is not going to be given the authority to do anything to better the team. So and that means things like there's a trade deadline coming up that you need, that's going to be in March, I believe. Like there are things that are going to come up that could, in theory, if you're ready for it, could help you get better sooner rather than later and get back to
with a
being a good
fresh
hockey
lens.
with a fresh lens,
Yeah.
right? And you don't have
Yeah,
to
because of Jim Benning looking at the trade deadline is looking, how can I preserve my job now that there are rumors that they're going to fire me? Whereas a new guy being like, okay, I'm the fresh guy on the block. How can I set this team up for the next 3 to 4 years while I have this job? It's a completely different outlook and changes exactly like pretty much everything that the Canucks are looking for with trades and asset acquisition. So they kind of need to do it now. Like did part of you think when they won tonight that they might look at this as like the start of the comeback?
I mean, anything is possible on that front for sure. I don't know. I honestly don't know at this point. I think the Canucks, in a way, they're in too deep. Like I think the Aquilinis are past the point of no return to a certain extent, because like you can't come back from that. Like with your coach, essentially, where literally there are rumors that, again, like you mentioned, there are rumors that they're looking for Travis Green's replacement. In a way, they can't really be like, "Hey, buddy, no hard feelings." Like, no, you can't do.
JK.
Yeah, just kidding. Oh, it's a prank, bro.
We were just trying to see who the leak was in the office.
Yeah,
that's what we were doing.
It was Jeff, the janitor. Like,
yeah, you never met him, but we fired him. Don't worry.
Yeah,
we certainly dealt with this.
It's my girlfriend from Alberta. That's who it was.
It's DJ Baroness.
Oh dear, man.
Allegedly.
Oh gee. But I did want and actually that does segue nicely into a segment I did want to ask you about specifically, because we were actually talking about this a little bit before the show. Let's say tomorrow, I don't know, the Canucks hire a president of hockey ops tomorrow. They let go of Jim Benning, and then they hire you as GM or me. Like, so we'll say, but we'll obviously from each other's perspective. If you're the GM of the Canucks tomorrow, right now, based on what you have for the rest of the season, looking at what you've got, what changes, if any, do you make before the end of the year?
I would try and I'd field trade propositions on Horvat and Miller. You got to start with the blue line. So you're basically like, you need a right-handed center too. Like, you need a lot to basically make this team from what they are into something actually like, good. But those two are expiring in the next 2 years. So they probably fetch the biggest value for you. Maybe Brock Besser does, but his qualifying offer is really high. So maybe you do a sign and trade with Minnesota or something, and you try and get something back in return, like a Matt Dumba or whatever. Like, I don't know. But you got to buy out Tucker Poolman at the end of this year. Guy's terrible. He's so bad. They need to whoever's been in charge of their pro scouting in the defense department needs to I would fire that person immediately. Any person that's been a part of their pro scouting department for longer than 8 years, I'd get rid of all of them. Every single one.
Really?
Yeah, okay. It's pathetic. Like, this team in particular has chased the exact same archetype of a defenseman for basically since they took over. Like with Spiza, with Goodbranson, with Shen again, with Tucker Poolman. Like, it's just the same guy over and over and over again, hoping that finally they'll get it right and find this stud, tall, big, hard-nosed defenseman or defensive defenseman who can, has a good first pass, as they always like to point out.
Or in Tucker Poolman's case,
no good pass. No good pass. It's like,
geez, that pass today, good. Like, I straight up I lost it.
So
like
bad.
I was watching, so yeah, he has all the time in the world to make.
And he just rips it into his
easiest decision of his life, and he's like, I'm gonna rip it straight through the corner because he let straight through the straight forward. Because he let the Canadiens player bear down on him
for too long.
for too long.
Because he held the puck for like 8 seconds, staring right at his check.
Seconds. He could have literally just chipped it along the boards over the blue line. That could have been. He could have done that.
He could have gone back to his partner. He could have done so many other things to manage the puck better in that situation.
Yeah,
Instead, he just like ripped. Like it wasn't even like a pass. It was like he shot the puck for a dump in and hit it off of his skate, and then the puck came off with such momentum that it gave the other team a rush chance that he could not defend. Like it was just like, oh my god, dude!
Literally, the only way that could have been worse for him is if he had also done like the Charlie Brown kicking the football thing, where he just goes woo, like in that
he kind of did
in that very cartoony way, where you just see him turn into a circle and then fall and then splat on the ground. Like
that is kind of what he did, though, trying to defend the puck carrier when they did enter the zone, though, where he like very lazily just kind of crouched over and stuck his stick out and then like spun slowly. It's just like, oh, dude, you're getting paid. I mean, we were saying about this before the show. It is not Tucker Pullman's fault that he's on a 4-year, $3 million or whatever it is, $2.25 million contract. That's not his fault. No. His agent deserves all the kudos for fleecing an idiot GM for thinking this is a reasonable contract to give a nothing defenseman. Like, for those that don't know, Tucker Pullman had 1 point last year playing with Josh Morrissey, who is a pretty good producing defenseman, and Tucker Pullman was deemed not good enough for the Winnipeg Jets defense, so they overhauled everything about their blue line, starting with not re-signing Tucker Pullman because he brings nothing to the table.
You know what blows my mind even more about that decision is that this isn't. It's not even a case of like this is a player who they've seen on like 1 or 2 occasions, or a player in last year's case, a player in a different division or conference because there was no interleague play. They saw him play 10 times last year, or his team play at least his team play like 9-10 times last year, and they still said, "Yep, this guy's worth $2.5 million."
Like this is our Stetcher replacement that we didn't replace last season, or this is our Jalen Chatfield replacement, like
who just got called up by the Hurricanes, by the way.
Honestly, I was laughing so hard because friend of the program, Riley Miner, had tweeted out how he had been called up, and I was cracking up because I looked up his points total, and he's got 7 points in 17 games, which is like he's doubled his points production at the AHL level, which is just so funny. Like you really have to admire it. That's so good. I put it in a group chat I'm in with Riley and some other hockey people, where I was like, the funniest thing that didn't really get talked about, but I pointed it out like a couple times on Twitter. But the funniest thing about that post-bubble offseason was the Canucks clearly were like, we're not going to spend any money. We're cinching the purse strings. We can't afford any of our UFAs. We don't want to spend any money. Whatever prospects we have in the system, they are going to be our defense next year, and we're going to hope for the best. And in anticipation of the season, Jim Benning started hyping up all the guys. He's like, oh, Ulevi, he's ready to play. He's going to be like Alex Edler back there. He's got a great first pass. Brogan Rafferty is a great puck-moving defenseman. He's got a great first pass. And then these guys are already signed. And then he goes to Jalen Chatfield, and he says, yeah, Jalen Chatfield, he's got a good first pass. He plays hard. He's basically like Chris Tanev out there. And nobody really said anything except me, because I was the only guy to like actually watch him play. And I was like, Jalen Chatfield is not Chris Tanev. Like, don't put that kind of expectations on him. That's so unfair to him, this player. But the comparisons continued over the summer for like 3 weeks, where he's like, Chatfield's going to come in. He's an NHL player. He's ready to play for us. But the problem was, he didn't have him fucking signed to a contract. So Jalen Chatfield's agent came out and was like, talking to Rick Dollywall, and he's like, oh yeah, you know what? We got a lot of great offers on the table from other teams. The KHL's come calling for us. If Jim Benning and the Canucks can't field a decent enough offer for us, we're probably going to take our services elsewhere. And so Jim Benning then signed him like a week later to some like $750,000 league minimum contract that had like a $500,000 or $350,000 AHL salary. And that doesn't seem like much, but for an AHL defenseman, that's a lot of fucking money. And it is just so funny that he raised the contract value of a marginal AHL defenseman because he couldn't keep his mouth shut.
He
Like,
literally was like, he was talking him up to the point where he did he played
he
the
was
role
doing
of
the agent's job for him. The
Yeah.
agent was just like, "Oh,
I
thanks, man.
forgot all about that.
By the way,
Whoops.
we want to raise now that you've said all these things that I can use to sell my client elsewhere."
Like,
Like,
oh my god, like
so
you're just
funny,
like,
dude.
all right, you're literally in a meeting. It's like, okay, Jim, whatever you do, remember, temper the public expectations
Yeah.
on Jalen
Don't-
Chatfield. I
don't-
got this. Don't worry.
For
Jalen
the love of
Chatfield is
God.
the second coming of Nicholas Lidstrom
Yeah.
combined with every great defenseman ever, like with Ray
Sick.
Bork and a touch of who else am I missing here? Rob Blake. I don't know. Like you just throw in like every great adjective of a great defenseman.
Yeah,
like,
just like
and they're
let's
like, no,
let's compare him directly to a beloved defenseman that we are too cheap to re-sign. Like how bad could that go, right? Like,
Yeah.
what an idiot.
Literally the only play at that point is you have to hype up every single player so it becomes meaningless to the point where it's like you're even if it's like a defenseman, you're like, or a forward, you're like, yep, he's Rob Blake, he's any defenseman you want.
Yeah.
He's Sidney Crosby,
Yeah.
that's Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid. Like, you just go down the list of describing each player.
So whenever he goes to like trade negotiations, and he's like, "Oh, this kid I got, Jalen Chatfield or Zach McEwen, he's basically like Bobby Orr out there."
How did I forget
the other
Bobby Orr?
GMs are just like,
how tired I am. God, embarrassing.
They're just like, "Jim, you got to stop comparing your players to other players. We don't know what to ever read into for your players. We'll just leave it to our stats department. Please don't talk about your players."
He is. Look, guys, I'm just saying he's the Paul Coffey of Bobby Orr's. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, he's that good. Like, yeah.
Like this is we're making fun of him for how open and honest he is and just putting his foot in his mouth. But it's admirable that there's a GM who is just so bluntly honest about his players. Like, you always hear the term like a player's coach, right?
Right.
We've never had a player's GM, and that's what Jim Benning is to a certain extent.
Boy.
when he likes his guys, he hypes them up to the point of fucking up his internal cap. But if he doesn't like the guys, he is the opposite of a player's GM, and he is kind of an asshole and kind of a monster. Case in point, any UFA that walked away, like Troy Stetcher or Chris Tanev or like whoever, the Sedins even, like he just can't help but like kick dirt on their grave on their way out, which never great. Sven Baertschi, sorry.
And then he also like definitely does the GM, like, I'm going to like not tell you the full truth on this, but then does it to a point where he just is straight up lying, and it's like, oh no, that's not, we meant be discreet, we didn't mean literally flat out lie to them. Like
like the Hamonic thing, like, I won't comment on his vaccination status, but let me tell you, in a few weeks we'll definitely be all vaccinated. It's just like,
let's steer clear of the fact that, again, this was a game in Canada and Travis Hamonic wasn't there. Interesting.
God.
He could have been there. I don't know what's going on there. Interesting.
He didn't play for Abbotsford on the weekend either when they went to the States, so he's clearly still in his 2 weeks or whatever.
This is it's all very weird. So I guess I'll say, for like me, what I'm looking at if I'm if I'm GM like tomorrow, what I will say, like, I still think that overall, Bo Horvat, like you look at Bo Horvat, the two, like you mentioned, JT Miller and Bo Horvat are like kind of like the two guys that people are looking at. It's like they're the ones with trade value, the
With
ones that
value,
you're
yeah.
not like are not immediately a hard no, essentially.
Yeah.
I will still say that I think Horvat as a captain and as a leader really benefits. It still benefits you to have on your roster and at least try to make things work there. JT Miller, on the other hand, I look at as a guy where I'm like, he's your scoring leader. He's definitely like, even though he's been, I think, their scoring leader each of the past 3 seasons now, it's still kind of not indicative of what the team actually is and what they're like, where their skill lies, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where the Canucks are in a position where they could, in theory, really sell very high on JT Miller. And the way I look at it is this year, if I'm the GM, I basically am going to the players, like the core group, essentially. And I'm like, look, this year already is kind of in trouble. I'm going to have to make some decisions that are going to not help us right now because and it's going to hurt for us this year. But if they work out, in theory, we're going to be a lot better off for it next season. Yeah. And especially in a guy like Miller's case, where he still has some term, he is, again, leading scorer. He has a lot of value to teams, particularly the type of teams that are on the fringe of a playoff spot and are like, are where the Canucks usually are, where they're like, oh, we just need that one piece and we're good and we're going to be a champion. And you go to them and you're like, okay, here's give us something good. You better give us a nice package for this guy. And
give us Bowen Byram for JT Miller, Colorado.
Oh, there you go. Is he right? I'm forgetting in the moment right now if he's a righty defenseman, because that's the thing. If I'm the Canucks, essentially, it's the case of we absolutely need to fix our right defense. You immediately need to either through a direct trade for with a JT Miller type, or either through kind of going the long way around where you just trade JT Miller or somebody in that vein for the best assets you can and flip that to get your defenseman. That's what they need to be doing. That's what they need to be focusing their attention to right now. Because I do see a scenario, I think, because you and I were talking about it before the show, that both of us are kind of worried in the sense of the way things are going, that the amount of damage that has been done to the Canucks roster wise and development wise and depth chart wise, that it might take the next GM a while to untangle everything and to fix and to sort through it all. I will I think you're a little bit more on the side of that's definitely not definitely where it's going, but the odds are more in that line of thinking than anything else. But I'll say, in terms of what the Canucks have at their disposal, the core group, there's enough potential there that, again, if a GM is willing to take some calculate some much more calculated risks, especially in terms of this season, they can really cash in nicely. I look at Colorado as a good example. The fact that they were terrible. There was that one year where they were absolutely awful. They finished dead last. And everyone literally was like, oh my God, they need to get rid of everyone. Jared Bednar's a terrible coach. Get rid of him. They need to trade everybody except for Nathan McKinnon, essentially. And to Joe Sakic's credit, he didn't panic. He ended up trading Matt Duchene for a very, very nice amount of goods, essentially, in that 3-way deal with Nashville.
A franchise-altering trade that saw him land Sam Girard, saw him land the first-round pick that went unprotected, and that ended up being
I think it was
Newhook, wasn't it?
It might have been Newhook, because they had Makar already with their with the pick that they got at number 4, and then Pettersson came right after, or if I'm remembering correctly, and that trade completely set them up for the rest of the era, basically, where they are now. They are as good as they are now thanks to that trade. That was a huge turning point for them. Yeah. And I want to didn't they get there was it was a massive deal, and it was because the Avalanche literally looked at themselves and went, okay, this year might be a loss for us, or like the last little bit might be a tough sale for us. But if we are proactive now about fixing it rather than being like, well, let's wait and see how the rest of the year goes, we can get this fixed sooner, and we can actually get to start building up, and especially around the trade deadline where people get very desperate and try to make it, and will make any trade they can get just for that one sniff of a playoff victory, right?
And
so yeah.
And the smart thing that they did too is they didn't just trade, whatever they had with value to whatever team they could. Like I don't know if it was calculated or like it might have just been like happenstance that Ottawa was the only team that was in on Duchesne or however that worked out.
Them in Nashville, I think, were in there.
And Nashville was also there as a third party as well, right?
Yeah.
But I have to wonder if they said, look, Ottawa is wanting a player that is not going to fit with them long term. It doesn't really make sense for them to want our guy right now because they were just at the conference finals, but that was a blip. And the chances that they bottom out in the next couple of years is pretty high. And I think Ottawa even recognized that when they had that first year with Duchesne or whoever it was, and they were like, oh, this is not going to work out. Maybe we overestimated our cup run or our playoff run that saw us one game away from the Stanley Cup Finals. And I mean, if they really thought that far ahead, like kudos, because it worked out because they got a top 5 pick out of it or a top 10 pick out of it. And having 2 top 10 picks in a single draft usually results in quick turnarounds for teams when they have a good scouting staff. And the Avs are basically lined up in 3 back-to-back drafts. It's, Makar, it's Byram, Newhook, not Shane Bowers, but some other kid. But
Shane Bowers, I think,
or Martin Kaut, I think his name was. But anyway, that's a lot. Like that's kind of what they need to do. Like the Canucks, if they could find that team that is really pushing for a playoffs run, even though they might be kind of having a blip of a season, that's what you should try and do. Like if LA Kings come calling for JT Miller, you absolutely try and recoup whatever young prospect they have. You go for, Turcotte, you go for Kaliev, you go for Kupari, like you go for whomever.
You're not going to get Quentin Byfield, but ask for him anyway. Ask for him anyway.
You start there and you work your way down, because if you haven't checked, the LA Kings have a just disgusting amount of riches in their prospect pool. Their farm team is like the second best team in the AHL, and it's like 97% a team that is under 23 years old. Like it is gross what they're pulling off with their youth group there. So if you're the Canucks and they, come calling for JT Miller because they think they can actually do something with this group, you start with whatever top players are on their AHL team right now, or guys that are, on the cusp of breaking into the NHL. Like hell, go for Mo Verari or whoever that top defenseman is in the AHL right now, and add in Jarrett Anderson Dolan, who's struggled to keep an NHL spot. Like get guys that might
Tyler
work
Madden
out.
Back.
Could you imagine?
Just
a roundabout way, you get Tyler Madden back.
A roundabout way, all for just like 10 games of Tyler Toffoli. Oh man, yeah.
This is all Jim's plan.
Looking at like some of the teams that might be like, I'm trying to look at like basically looking at teams that might be like vulnerable in that spot. The only teams that I could really, or like vulnerable to maybe getting a bit too overzealous about how good they are. The Kings might be in there. They've fallen a little bit back in recent games.
Yeah.
Vegas is one of those teams that kind of is always,
and they love to go all in too.
They love to go all in. They've I think run out of prospects more or less. Unless you want Shea Theodore or something like that, who I wanted back when the Nate Schmidt trade happened. I really wanted the Canucks to try and hold out for Theodore. there's maybe a case you can. Obviously Minnesota called about JT Miller already, and I was kind of like, I don't know enough about, say, I think it's Callie Addison or something. Is there like prospect defenseman who's currently with their big club? I don't know if he's necessarily a big like a blue chip prospect by any stretch, but maybe there's something there, because I was looking at their defense like, oh, they have good defensemen, but on the right side, but good luck getting them to give you one of their captain Jared Spurgeon or Matt Dumba. They're not giving you either of those, even for JT Miller, unless you're sweetening the pot there.
Unless you're throwing in your first round pick, at which point you're just kind of setting yourself up for a worse first round pick and a bunch of bets. Whereas you want to use a trade of a Horvat or a Miller, or I won't say it, but maybe a Thatcher Demko trade to try
no,
kickstart the rebuild part 2.
No, that's you only make that trade if you're blowing the whole thing up, which again, I don't think they need to do.
I will posit that, just as a reminder, Thatcher Demko is in the NHL, or started his NHL career because his camp went to Jim Benning and said, we're sick of playing in the AHL, make room for our player or we're gone. So he isn't afraid to voice his displeasure if things aren't working out. And I think I already pointed this out, I don't know, like 10 episodes ago, that if you really wanted to try the LA Kings maneuver, a Demko to the Kings thing or trade could really be spicy in what you could get in return for Thatcher Demko, who's a proven Vezina goaltender. Or Vezina caliber goaltender, I should say.
Next year, you can say that for sure.
I don't know, man. I think he's going to get votes this year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like by next year, he will be a
I guess that would be next
caliber candidate, because he will have won his first Vezina trophy, or at least getting there. Because the Rangers are an interesting team as well, because they're, I believe, third in their division, but they're clearly punching above their weight a little bit right now. Obviously, you're not going to get them to give you, say, Adam Fox, obviously, who would be the right defenseman that you might want. I mean, Jacob Trouba is very good as well, but again, he's 27. He doesn't really fit the timeline you're going for.
Yeah.
So you have to look at a guy like, you're not getting Adam Fox. So, I mean, I don't know enough about Nils Lundqvist, who's 21. He's a 21-year-old Swedish defenseman. I believe he is a first round pick. 28
very well.
Okay, well then maybe there's your in. Maybe that's your in. Maybe you look at an idea of like, you go to the Rangers and you're like, hey, I know your team's you've got some scoring talent. You've got Panarin. You've got obviously Kreider, Zibanejad. You have a pretty decent group, but what if I could offer you an upgrade on, say, a Barclay Goodrow in JT Miller, who's already played for you and knows you very well. So you go to he returns to Broadway. They go on their playoff quest, and the Canucks get a Nils Lundqvist out of it.
Could you imagine? Maybe there's a spot. Could you imagine JT Miller playing with Artemi Panarin? Just how much points those two would rack up together.
That would be a lethal combo. I think, that first line would be, in theory, if you're, let's say, if you're not putting Miller at center, which I assume you're not.
Yeah.
Either you could go with something, say, Zibanejad centering Chris Kreider and Miller on the right, or you go Panarin up there and Zibanejad and Miller. Also, Capo Caco's in the mix. You have Ryan Strome. Like, they have
Lafreniere.
They have a decent mix.
That's your pitch. You'd be like, look, we got JT Miller mentoring that fat idiot Jake Virtanen to a near 20 goal performance, and that worked out pretty good. He could maybe mentor Lafreniere, because apparently, I don't know if you read about this, but like all the fan base and like New York pundits are like all worried because Lafreniere hasn't exactly like lit the world on fire in New York yet.
Yeah, because he was supposed to be not, say, a Connor McDavid necessarily, but he was supposed to be like up there. Like, he was supposed to be like one of the next coming sort of players, in the same way that like Shane Wright is now. Or is now. So yeah, he's been good. Like, he's been fine. He just hasn't been as good as advertised. Capo Caco kind of in the same realm of another guy, like second overall pick, I think. And he is not he's done fine. Again, another case of like literally, if it wasn't for where he got drafted, he'd be doing fantastic. But because he got drafted so high, it looks bad. It looks like he's doing poorly by comparison to say who got drafted after him. There's your like honestly, like again, it's the question of I don't know what JT Miller's contract situation is like. I don't like in terms of I believe he might have a no move or like a modified no move of some kind.
I don't think he does actually.
The Canucks might, because I'm trying to remember how. I guess in theory, no, because the Lightning, because that's how the Lightning were able to get rid of him in the first place. With their books being so put together. I mean, God, since the last time we talked, I mean, there's the whole thing of him screaming, "We don't know what we're doing in practice." You gotta dial that. You gotta pull that back. Be like, that's just tough
according
time.
to Drance, that was actually taken out of context. It was actually supposed to be like meant in a fun way because they were doing a drill they'd never done before. So it was like like him like mocking like the coach, like we don't know what we're doing. We've never done this before. But it was in the latest Athletic. But
interesting. Okay, that's fun. That's funny. Again, another one of those things where it's like, unless you have a recording of it, it doesn't translate over Twitter very well, or like in writing.
And you'd have to recognize like every single hockey drill they've ever done, which no human in their right mind would ever know. So,
I'm sure we could if we were, because we're nuts enough that we could, but like
you have to go to every practice and it would take a lot of work.
It'd take a lot of work. But that's kind of like maybe like straight up looking at it right now, no, JT Miller has no terms on his contract. That's a spot to look. That's honestly a good spot to look. Is you go to the Rangers and maybe say, hey, do you want a polished gem JT Miller now for your team? Like,
we polished him up for you. He's back to being awesome. We know you traded him to Tampa Bay because he was a little too raw for you, but we mined some gold out of them hills for you. Have him back, please, and give us your best right shot defenseman.
Interesting. You know what? Here's an interesting little factoid that came up as well today. Speaking of the Canucks GMs and whatnot, the Canucks tonight earned their first regulation win in Montreal since January 16th, 2007. That night was when Roberto Luongo posted a 30-save shutout. And as at Samantha CP, aka Sam from the broadcast, pointed out, that Luongo did that after having been hit in the throat by a puck earlier in the morning skate. So he came out of that game with a shutout because he is an absolute just the best. And I said to you yesterday when the Bergevin thing got announced, because again, like as we know with the Canadiens, it's very important to them that they get a bilingual GM. It is very it is as just as much a mandatory part of the job for them as the experiences or what have you on a resume kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Roberto Luongo fits that description. He's a Montreal-born guy. He is, again, very clearly trying to go for a job at the NHL level in the GM thing. And I said to you, I'm like, I swear to God, if the Canucks don't move their asses and they lose Roberto Luongo to the Canadiens because they didn't move fast enough, I'm gonna flip my biscuit, like, big time.
Well, it might have to happen.
that might have to happen. I'm gonna hold out hope that the Canadiens don't do it just because they decide to go in this completely other unthought of direction. I did want to point out there was a great article by one Spencer Gillis. Interesting last name.
Indeed.
He did a really great article basically outlining like 10 candidates for the GM job or 15, that would fit that bill very well. Luongo was one of the ones he mentioned. And that to me bodes well for, again, a guy who I believe would be a great GM for the Canucks in Luongo. But also it's worth just looking at in terms of like, maybe Vancouver doesn't necessarily have an absolute straight up need for a bilingual general manager specifically, but the names on there are interesting in terms of these
Yeah.
are also candidates the Canucks could just hire because they want to.
Yeah.
Like JP Barry is up there, player agent. I believe he is. Is he not? Is he not Brock Besser's agent? Am I missing? Am I forgetting something? I believe he's a Canucks player agent right now.
I don't know that. I don't know. I think Pat Brisson is one of Pedersen or Hughes or Demko's. Or sorry,
Yeah, that
he's one of the core guys agents,
I
but
think
he
they.
represents like all like the big money in the NHL. Like he's one of the big fucking units who represents like
Malkin,
close to $1
Dougie
billion
Hamilton.
worth of contracts.
Yeah, Matt Barzell is in there as well.
Yeah.
Like that's a good pick. He mentioned Gina Kingsbury in there as well. There's a lot of names in here. Is there any player like general manager candidate in terms of what the Canucks are looking at, either from this list or from just your own personal, like, kind of delving into the topic? Is there anybody that stuck out recently that you're like, oh, if this guy got or this woman got a general manager job, they could do great things with it?
I like the idea of the National League guy from the Swiss League, Yannick Steinman. His whole thing is that he's like only 34 years old, and he's used like technology to improve like based on human performance results to try and drive improvements in the team's games. And I think they've been promoted since he took over, and they've like been basically a top tier team since he took over. So that to me is interesting. Like I'm all about like guys who aren't the stereotypical just like, oh, look for hockey trades, big defenseman, like I need, or like he has a good first pass, like I need something a bit more than that.
You want somebody who's going to think, who's going
So
to come in a little bit
anything
more of an
with keywords
outsider
like
thinking.
yeah, exactly, and that are not afraid of doing stuff outside the box to improve their teams. So I'm all about that. Other names out there, Alain Roy, who's another French speaking agent. I only suggest him because he followed me on Twitter at one point, and so I'm just gonna say if he wants to become a GM, that would be very helpful because I can DM him, so that'd be very good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really great like list, and like so like to be completely
Again,
honest,
yeah.
after the executives thing on Saturday or whatever it was, I finished recapping the Abbotsford Canucks games. I decided I'm going to have a bunch of edibles and finally relax, and so I got really, really stoned, and I started reading that article at like I don't know, like 12:30 or something.
Nice.
And I kept forgetting what the article was, and though it was like on one screen and I
Oh
had
my
like
God.
a stream on the other screen. So I'd keep looking back and I would read like Yannick Steinman. And I'd be like, what's this for? What is this? And I'd scroll all the way to
Yes.
the top, be like, oh, right, it's Spencer Gillis's thing. Okay, I guess. Scroll all the way to the bottom, go to the next one. Forget
Oh
about
man.
it. Come back.
Oh, you're taking it day by day. Nice.
I was taking it day by day. I was taking it line by line, and eventually I got through the article. It's really
Cody
great.
just
Check it out
turns
on the
into a
province.
goldfish. He just turns into a goldfish
Yeah,
when he's a little bit baked.
I absolutely went goldfish brain. Like that was probably the most stoned I've been in like a long time. I was like, did I have weed? What did I eat? I'm fucking really messed up right now.
As a stone cold sober guy, I very much envy you. I envy your ability to get to that point where you can just like
go beyond
relax.
level
You don't
10.
have to think. Yeah, you can just be like, oh, nothing else. Like you don't have to think about anything else for at least like a few hours. I am just always on edge.
It did fuck me up though, because then I slept in until like noon, and so like I was planning on tracking hockey all Sunday.
Oops.
And that didn't happen. So now I've got to try and do it all after we're done recording, and then tomorrow before the Tuesday game that Abbotsford faces against the Ontario Reign, again the top team in the AHL's Pacific Division.
Yep.
Um,
But yeah, that's a good list. People should go check that
check it
out.
out.
I, of
It
course,
rocks.
again, I'm very steadfast in the fact of the Canucks need to get going on
Before
Roberto
someone else
Luongo
takes him from you.
before someone else scoops him. This is the guy. This is the damn guy, and I'm gonna be mad. I'm not gonna be. Here's the thing. I'm not gonna be mad if they say, "Oh, we went in a different direction." Like it's one of those things where it's like they interview him or at least give it a look and go, "We decided to go in a different direction." I won't be mad in that case. I will be mad if some other team just beats them to it. Like they just because they're not going because they don't move quick enough. Some other team steps in front of them and goes, here's the GM role, have fun, and they lose because of that. That'll be mad about. So at least do your due diligence. Go get the guy who's going to win you a damn cup, and that's Lou.
At least interview him. Pretend that you're interested for the sake of the fans.
Yeah, yes, please, for me, just for me personally. If Francesco wants to tweet at me and be like, at Lach and the Crease, we did the thing, don't you worry, I'd be like, thanks,
Don't worry,
buddy.
We
Thanks,
got
man.
you covered.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into some other NHL news, I guess, now that we
Yeah.
kind of run the gamut on the Canucks side of things. Let's start with first Brendan Lemieux, known shitheel in the NHL, bit Brady Tkachuk during a fight in a game in which the LA Kings were getting stomped, which is always totally cool and totally normal. The video of Brady Tkachuk reacting to the bite and in the press box where he's like throwing his hands in the air and like outrage, like it's really funny. But your thoughts on another biter in the NHL?
Oh God, where to begin? So like, okay, I think Kevin BX put it very well on Hockey Night in Canada. Where he's talking about like, there's no place for biting in hockey. That shouldn't be a thing. However, if a guy puts it in your mouth or like mouth, yeah, you go ahead.
You're pretty much asking for it.
I am of that mindset where I'm like, okay, yeah, no, you can't just go out of your way to like bite somebody. But if a guy literally grabs your jaw or something, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
One of those things, but obviously we're talking about Brendan Lemieux here. Noted, just a swell guy.
Super rad dude. Co-host of the Watch Your Tone podcast with
I forgot
Tony
about-
D'Angelo.
God, yeah, God, what a
his dad
what a pair.
sucks pretty hard, which is anyway.
Known,
Just
interesting fella.
I just love the discourse that came out after it, where it was like one of the Manitoba Moose beat reporters was like, here's a bunch of examples of him being a shithead, and then people being like, why didn't you report this at the time? And he's like, it didn't fit anything I was talking about at the time. And it's just like,
that was like literally going like literally, God, like again, it's one of those great, like again, I have no media, like I'm not a professional media person. I'm like not a regular credentialed writer by any stretch yet. So hopefully soon, but now not yet. God, like here's the thing. I do understand like the media aspect of like, hey, if you're the only person that saw this happen, it is very hard to get anyone to corroborate that story.
yeah.
But at the same time, like, how do you not like you can't then back that up? Your reasoning behind why you didn't report on that at the time cannot be, it's not my job to say Brendan Lemieux is a bad guy.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
But you could have asked the coach after the practice, like,
could have tried,
like, hey, why is Brendan Lemieux firing shots at Eric Comrie's head at a practice? Is that a normal thing to do? And then you report it. And it's not like an accusatory or a cancel culture thing. And I'm using air quotes there.
Yeah.
It's just reporting and doing your job.
Yeah. And I have to imagine I have to at least imagine in a Canadian market that like you're not the only person at Manitoba Moose practice. Like, come on, there's got to be somebody else, some other media person there who also saw it, who can back you up on it. Like, come on.
Here's a recent example where I know for a fact that this guy was the only person at the rink. Chris Faber, friend of the program, was at a Abbotsford Canucks practice, and he was live tweeting the entire thing, and he called out a moment where Jet Wu rode a forward pretty hard into the net, and then Vinny Arsenault got really pissed off at him and was about to come to blows with him, and then stormed off, threw a water bottle at the wall, blew it up, and then ran down the tunnel and like in a shit fit. And he could have held that and been like, oh, it's not a story. But because he's live tweeting, it's just like, oh, it's whatever. I'm just describing things that happen with no kind of prejudice or like like any attempt at cancel culture, again, air quotes, or any kind of narrative. He's just describing what happens. This
Yeah.
guy also could have just been like, hey, here's things that happened at practice. Brendan
Easily.
Lemieux threw a bunch of shots at Eric Comrie's head. Next
On
bullet.
purpose.
Let
Like,
everyone else dictate the message from then on.
and then you go into the fact that, again, you saw him punch a guy. You saw him punch a staffer. Like,
yeah, like what the
that's
fuck? In the
how
nuts.
is
Like, come on.
yeah, again, it's one of those things, like, it's like, yeah, it's such a case of, like, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you're kind it seems very much like you're worried about losing your
I-
credentials thing, which is not good. And again, if you're a good reporter who's doing their job, like, people are gonna back you up, and it's not gonna matter. You will
But
get
the team
back
won't care
eventually.
either. They'll be like, yeah, you're just doing your job.
You're just
You're
doing
not
your
gonna
job.
lose your right
Maybe
for
a player's gonna yell at you, or a coach is gonna get mad at you and try to
Yeah.
induce, like, because there have definitely been cases in the relationship between hockey people and media where, like, a player has lost it on somebody, or a coach has
Yeah.
lost it on somebody over, even if it's something, even like a true thing that happened. Like, that's totally happened before.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't, when you see something like that, you should be like, oh, I'm gonna not talk.
I'm not gonna acknowledge this at all.
And then
I'm
try to
gonna
defend
hold it
yourself,
through.
being like, it's not my job to make sure people are doing a good, are like, to keep checks and balances.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. You're a journalist. Yes, it is.
Literally-
That's literally your only
It's
job.
literally your job as an observer.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Like, yeah. Anyway, that
Anyway,
was
dude
all
sucks.
interesting. I did like the quotes that Brady Tkachuk gave essentially on it, and I sent you the video. Some
Of
lovely person,
Gilbert Gottfried reading
Yeah,
it out for a
somebody-
cameo.
yeah, somebody paid for a cameo of Gilbert Gottfried,
Gilbert
aka
Gottfried.
the parrot in
Iago, the
Aladdin.
parrot?
Yeah, Iago. Yeah, Iago, the Affleck duck, among other things. They got him to read out Brady Tkachuk's quote. It is
Yeah, big fan.
very funny. Go check it out. Yeah, his quotes are funny. And then, like, Jonathan Quick had some quotes today where he basically was like, also, like, defending Brendan Lemieux, which honestly does not surprise me in the slightest, knowing Jonathan Quick. But
Yes.
also, it's his teammate. Of course, he's gonna back his teammate up, even if he doesn't like the guy. But
Yeah.
I mean, for it to be anybody backing him up, for it to be Jonathan Quick, that does kind of, like, that tracks, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's that.
Speaking of California shit heels, Evander Kane was put on waivers by the San Jose Sharks. He is supposed to report to the AHL affiliate San Jose Barracuda. Maybe you will make a trip out this weekend to the San Jose Barracuda game where he might be playing.
Oh, that's right. I could do that. I honestly have not. It has not even registered that I could be going to see those Abbotsford games. And
You're
maybe that's
a
partially
Canucks
because
Army guy now. Come on.
I am, but I'm also a Canucks Army guy who doesn't have a car, so there's not an
This is
easy
true.
way for me to get over there unless a nice media person, I don't know, wants to give me a ride to the game. I'm not saying who that could be.
If I wasn't borrowing my sister-in-law's car, I would gladly volunteer driving people in that car, but I don't even trust myself driving that car. So
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But Evander Kane is on the Barracuda. I
Yeah.
saw a lot of people, like, getting, like, very worried because Rick Dhaliwal essentially reported, like, their agents are calling everybody, including Vancouver, right? Like, and people got very like, oh my god, this is classic. Like, we all know the Canucks and their owners and the management love their BC boys and their BC fix them.
They're local
projects.
fellas. Yep.
And I was like, okay, I can at least give Jim Benning and the Aquilinis enough credit to say that I don't think they are interested at all in Evander
Well,
Kane, considering what's happened, and also it's not. Of course, the agents are going to call everybody
Yeah.
to get him on a team.
No
Like they
shit,
weren't going to be
huh?
like everyone. They were going to be like everyone except the Canucks. We're not going to
Yeah.
call them for whatever reason. That wasn't going to be the case. Of course, they're going to say they call Vancouver, right?
Thomas Strands followed up on that story as well in his Army's or Athletic piece, where he basically said the Canucks like unequivocally will not be pursuing Evander Kane. So
Yeah. If
done is done. No need to sweat about it.
Yeah, no,
The only
don't worry
reason
about
he's
that.
coming to Vancouver is because he's visiting the team for games. That's it.
Yeah.
So no sweat, everybody.
Yeah.
Speaking of waivers, though, Matt Murray, friend of the program.
Oh, that's right, Matt Murray, Mr. Lucky
Yeah.
himself. Okay, I will say I actually feel bad for Matt Murray here because, like,
Playing
I
behind a
believe
dog
he's
shit
dealt.
team.
He's played on a bad team. Again, like I've said a bunch of times before, like I saw some people being like, "Oh, nobody could have predicted this with Matt Murray." I'm like, actually, I kind of did. I kind of said this was a concern for me with Matt Murray right out of the gate. Was that I think he is a very good goaltender. If your team is in the playoff hunt, is very much a playoff team, and you just need a guy who can like essentially cover you for the 20 or 25 shots that you might give up in a game. But if you're a team that is clearly very, very reliant on your goaltender to bail you out on a nightly basis, Matt Murray's not that guy. But Ottawa paid him thinking he was. And obviously that hasn't worked out. Obviously Murray has a lot of injury issues. And again, I feel bad for Murray more so in the sense of I believe he's dealing with some long-term COVID effects that hit him, if I'm not mistaken. I could be
I
wrong.
think so.
And that I have to imagine has played a big role into it. There's also, like I believe it's been touched upon that he's dealt with like some personal stuff that he's had to like take some time away from like the hockey to worry about as well, which is very important and stuff like that. So I feel bad for him in the sense of like this guy, like again, on a team that's a lot better and is much not so reliant on having a Thatcher Demko per se,
Yeah.
he would be fine. He'd be a decent goaltender. But it literally just comes down to the fact that the Senators paid him and gambled on him being a steal you games on a nightly basis type goaltender.
Yeah.
And that clearly hasn't worked out for him.
No. And they paid a lot, man. $6.25 million for 4 years or whatever it was. Like that's a big gamble on a goalie that didn't work out. I mean, maybe he comes back and it's another comeback story for Matt Murray where he leads the team to success. But behind this Ottawa Senators defense and team, it's probably not going to happen. But he can at least take solace knowing he's going to be the richest AHL player in the league. A title once held, I think, for the last like 3 years in a row by Vancouver Canuck players. So pretty good.
Yeah.
Think about that. That's depressing as shit. First was Sven Baertschi for 2 years. Then before that it was Sam Gagner. Like, oh my God.
In theory, it was technically Louis Eriksson last year when he was on the Texie squad, I think, at multiple points. Like, or if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think you'd be right if that technically counted.
Yeah, well, because that does technically count in the sense of like you have to clear waivers to get to the taxi squad, right? So he would have, in theory, in a normal year, he would have been on the AHL team unless he was just a healthy scratch. So yeah, he was. I believe, and because of the way his contract is structured, it didn't really give the Canucks any sort of cap relief that he was there, because of course it didn't. We have a couple questions from Twitter.
Yeah, let's get into our fan questions before we sign out for the night. From our producer, the real homie, Jacob New at JKM New on Twitter. What is the best TimBiebs? Have you had one yet?
I did. I went today.
Yeah?
I went to get them today. Another case of me not realizing that the box is like worth something, I guess, to people, because I just chucked it when it was empty. I chucked it. Like I was like, this is a box. Like I did that last time with the. Like, I don't know if you remember the absolute insanity around the BTS meal for McDonald's, where it was like,
just like going for the chicken nuggets or whatever. And
it was it was literally a very basic food, like meant like a meal or whatever
Yeah.
of like chicken nuggets and like I think a Sprite.
Yeah,
or
it's a
something.
spicier like barbecue sauce, and I think that's
Yeah.
all it was.
It just happened, and it just came in a bag that had the BTS logo on it. I guess like at
Yeah,
one point those were like so hard to
valuable.
get and come by that people were like paying for them on money for them on eBay, and
Strange.
and I was somebody who got an Uber Eats order that happened to come in one of those BTS bags, even though I did not order the BTS meal,
Yeah.
and I just was like, oh, a
Okay.
bag,
Cool.
a purple-y bag. Chuck
Yeah.
and like into the basket, into
Yeah.
the thing it goes. So I did have the TimBiebs, the Justin Bieber Timbits.
Yeah.
Again, I am not somebody who gives one iota about Justin Bieber as an artist.
Yeah.
But I was interested specifically because I like donuts, and I did like that they were coming out with specifically a sour cream chocolate chip Timbit for it. And because I like the sour cream glazed. I'm a big sour cream, at least at Tim
Okay.
Hortons anyway. I'm a sour
Sure.
cream glaze. I like the sour cream glazed. I will say maybe my batch was just bad, but like they were a bit stale. Like, or like at
Oh.
least like not like fresh out of the oven or
Yeah,
anything,
that'll
right?
kill it right there.
That killed it a little bit, so they were a little dry. But
Yeah.
overall, I will say that the best TimBiebs, yes, was in my opinion was the sour cream chocolate chip. The chocolatey, I think the chocolate one, if I remember correctly, I'm gonna have to like, oh yeah, there was chocolate white fudge was another one. So it was like a chocolate Timbit with white fudge like crumbs on it. Essentially, it was pretty. That would be number 2, and then the third one was like the birthday cake waffle one, which honestly was just like their birthday cake one, like their normal birthday cake Timbit.
Yeah, so
They
nothing
were
different.
fine, nothing different. I will say that like the other two, like the first two, would be great if they were regulars. Like if they were regular things, I could see those being like regular Timbits. But of course, in this particular case, they're probably not going to be. They're very clearly like one of those limited time only things. I would love to see them keep the. I'd love to try the sour cream chocolate chip again at in a better maybe at a better Tim Hortons. But yeah, I thought they were okay.
I
Yeah.
wanted to shout out Romina Schlaw's tweet about the what's Justin Bieber
So-
Timbits.
So
where
they're
she's like,
Timbits, but they're called TimBiebs.
yeah.
because-
So
sure.
Romina Schlaw tweeted, I want to try the TimBiebs, but I am a grown woman and too embarrassed to say, hello, one order of the TimBiebs, please. Like, there's no
I
way
did
you
that
can make me
today.
do that. Yeah, like,
I
can't do that either.
I did feel a little ashamed of myself as I did it. Which is why. Okay, this is just again. This is mainly due to the fact that I had been up till 3 a.m. working on work stuff. It
Yeah.
wouldn't have been a problem because I had originally ordered over like the mobile app.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't matter, right? But in my 3 hours of sleep head, I stupidly ordered to the wrong Tim Hortons. And so I had to do it again in person, and that sucked.
Yay.
But I
embarrassing.
did like shout out to Jacob because I did see him earlier today because he's in my classes at BCT, and we made the joke of like he gets his TimBiebs out in Georgia, so which I think that's such a dumb that I get my peaches out in Georgia line is the dumbest thing in the world, but I think
Stupidest
it's
thing ever.
so funny. I love just being like, I get my TimBiebs out in Georgia, like dumbest
Oh my
thing in
God.
the world.
That is so stupid.
It's
All right.
great.
Last question from the D Keeper himself, Daryl Keeping at D Keeping on Twitter. Call of Duty or Battlefield? I haven't tried Battlefield yet, but I've heard it's a very buggy game.
Isn't Battlefield like an older game? Like, isn't that not like
they're
like
re-releasing or not re-releasing? They're releasing a new battle royale version, like kind of to compete with Call of Duty Warzone. But what I've heard right now is that the game is very buggy because it's in its like beta bitch stage, and I've heard it's not great. So
I'm sure
until all of my friends hop off of Warzone and decide to switch to Battlefield, I will keep being a Warzone pleb.
Yeah. I can't really give a good answer on this particular questions because I do not play a lot of like RPG games or like I did like Star Wars Battlefront when I tried that. That
like
was
the
more
new
my
one
style.
or like the old
Battlefront
school.
2, I think it would have been Battlefront 2.
Okay.
I do want to try. I believe there's like a remastered. What is it? Knights of the Old Republic. I think.
Yeah, it just came out.
I've heard it's
Yeah.
very good, so I do want to try that. But that I think in itself is a completely different game than what we're talking about here. I did try Warzone during the pandemic because everyone else was playing, and I wanted to be I wanted to get like I want to play with the cool hockey people around here. I want to play some games. Sure, I'll give it a shot. I'm no good at it. I am not good at it. I'm sure I would enjoy it if I was okay at it. I did do the charity game during
that's right.
And I think I grazed Wyatt the Stanchion Art with a shot at one point, like in the shoulder or something, and it was literally the closest I came, and then he just destroyed me. Like,
Dummied you.
It was so like I was literally like, oh dip, if I had gotten him. And what made it even worse is Wyatt, I love you, buddy. Not to call you out or anything, but literally I was like, dude, I sent like his like fun Warzone like chat or whatever, right? I was like, oh, I nearly got you there. And he's like, honestly, I didn't even remember. And I'm like, cool. Cool, man. Cool. I was an unmemorable kill. That just tells you everything you need to know. Basically, I'm in the set where I'm like, until everyone gets way back into Among Us again, which I am good at. And also like I wouldn't mind doing like some Jackbox party games. I like Jack. Until people want to play that, I think I'm gonna have to sit the Warzone games out.
Fair. Well, if you want to keep sitting in on our content, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, guys. Every single podcast posted in video format where you can see our smiling faces. Lachlan's dope-ass beard and his Demko hat. Me in my not dead, just tired merch. You know how
Where did you get that merch? I
got that from Teespring. We might unveil we might get it out of the Disney vault or the CreaseCast vault.
Yeah,
maybe.
I do want to do you know, Christmas is coming up. We might have to do like maybe we have to do like a Christmas, a holiday
maybe
CreaseCast, a holiday CreaseCast merch. Yeah, or like some CreaseCast ugly sweaters or something. Maybe we'll do something
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can catch me, guys, on my Twitter handle at Cody Sievertson and my website ahlnuxharvest.com. That's also on Instagram at ahlnuxharvest. Lachlan, where can they find your content?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lock of the Crease. You can also find my writing work at canucksarmy.com. Again, I will have an article coming out in the morning, presumably around the time when you've gotten this podcast, about the Marc Bergevin firing and essentially what the Canucks can be taking from it, what kind of lessons they can be taking from it. And you can also make sure to check out our Patreon, $5 a month. You get bonus shows and some other stuff. You get to find out when we have guests early. You get to join our CreaseCast Discord. Yeah, there's some cool stuff in there. I believe we have
some things.
Yeah, we might have some new stuff coming up pretty soon. So yeah, go check that out as well if you have the time.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Thanks for listening to this one. Don't forget to drop us some reviews or some 5-star ratings. That helps with us on the algorithms, and we appreciate them very much. Until next time, it'll be episode 158 with Lachlan and Jacob, and then it'll be 159 with yours truly back on the dais. Catch you guys on the flippity flip. Bye!
Bye!